Back, guys. I'm pleased to introduce my first guest this morning, Craig Shirley. Craig is an author, a historian. He has a Reagan biography. He's written books, Reagan's Revolution, Rendezvous with Destiny, December 1941, Last Act, The Final Years, An Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, and Reagan Rising, The Decisive Years. Good morning, Craig. How are you?
Hey, Curt. Happy 4th or happy 3rd. Verging on happy 4th.
You too. I actually told people at the beginning of the show, this is actually the day after we declared independence, because we declared independence on the 2nd of July. We didn't actually formally, and apparently it took them about 48 hours to amend and fix that Constitution. This is an amazing time in this country's history. I think we are at what can only be called a watershed moment. I was a teenager under the Reagan administration, not a very politically active guy, but I recognized an amazing man. He was, my God, he was perfection. And I think from a moral and ethical standpoint, number one, but number two, the guy could speak. He knew, he had a presence about him. He had all of the things Donald Trump doesn't have when it comes to a public personality. He had charisma. Yes. He was an incredible speaker. He was passionate.
He was a student of history. He was a voracious reader. And somebody once did a study, and they found that Reagan quoted the framers and the founders more than any previous American president. He something like 25% of the speeches quoted, Adams, Jefferson, Washington, Thomas Paine. He believed deeply, which is why at the Reagan Library, the two documents that are engraved on the walls of the Reagan Library are the preamble to the Declaration and the preamble to the Constitution, because they had great meaning to Reagan.
Well, I always felt like, even at that age, and I wasn't political, I always felt like he understood what he was doing was monumental. The job he had carried with it a legacy that he was terrified to tarnish, and in a good way. And that adhering to the Constitution, abiding by the Constitution, upholding the Constitution were all good things.
Yeah,
and we were not 20-some years removed from the civil rights movement then as well.
Yeah, don't forget too, Curt, is that Reagan unleashed really the second American Revolution in the 1970s, fully 200 years after the first American Revolution, which was based in the Enlightenment, which said was the individual is more important than the state, which believed that power flowed from the people to the national government, not the other way around. And over the years, we've gotten away from that to the New Deal and the Great Society and the New Frontier, which made institutional government more important than people and made the government rule over people. And Reagan comes along beginning in the 1970s, says this is not the original intention of the framers or the founders. This is antithetical to what they intended, and I'm going to reassert the truth that Washington serves to exist to serve the American people and not the other way around.
If there's nothing more you can say about President Trump, it is that everything he has done has been for and about the American people.
You're getting the same results with Reagan and with Trump. Now, we're coming to understand that Reagan was a true intellectual. And as you know, his letters have come forward, and his writings and speeches, and this is a man who thought very, very deeply about things and was a voracious reader of American history, politics, and sociology, and things like that. Trump is more of an instinctual conservative. I would never say he was an intellectual, but he understands in his fiber, in his being, what is the right and proper role of government versus the American people. So, by the tax cuts, he's taking power away from the government and giving it back to the people. I read the other day that they're starting an initiative to shrink and combine federal agencies, which is a form of federalism, which is take power away from the national government, give it back to the states and localities. So he understands, and also this getting the country away from this nonsense of the neocon BS about the nation building, is taking us away from that and getting it back to America's proper role in the world, which is not to be the world's policeman, but rather lead by example rather than by using the military first.
You point out, I think, an important distinction. President Trump is not a politician. He is a pragmatist. He's a problem solver. He is a private sector success because President Trump recognizes you hire people to do jobs. If those people don't do the jobs, you fire them, which is exactly why he's had so much turnover. And people talk about, the instability in the Trump administration. That's not instability. That's him looking for and finding the right people to do the right jobs instead of the administration of Obama, who had no turnover, and you just accept the job people are doing, whether it's good or not. I mean, that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats.
It is the ultimate expression of the free market. Is that if you're doing your job, you keep your job. If you're not doing your job, you're fired. Socialism keeps people in mediocrity forever. Is that freedom it champions the success and the accomplishments of individual. And I'm sorry, but in our society there are winners and losers. And if you're a loser, if you're a bad administrator, if you're a bad secretary, then you get fired, and that's the way it should be.
It's a relevant point in the sense that everything that's happened in the last year and a half, from a legislation perspective, for the most part, has been incredibly beneficial, or is going to be incredibly beneficial to the American people.
Yes.
So I listened to liberals talk about the fact that Justice Kennedy's replacement is going to remove their rights. Apparently, they think we're going back to 1850 or something after Justice Kennedy's appointees.
That's typical liberal blather,
Right. No, but but here's the reason, and we both chuckle at it for the same reason. It's funny, but the fact of the matter is, some people are deadly serious about the fact that they believe everything's going to go away. I'm pretty sure that every right you had the day Trump got elected, you still have today. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure as a legal American, right? And so.
Well, actually, if you consider the tax cuts and the additional money you have in your pocket, he's expanded your rights.
That's absolutely valid. But they've made a segment of people believe this, which is the radicals you're seeing protest and violently protest First Amendment, peaceful rallies, and all the other stuff that goes with that. My biggest issue right now is, and I said this before you came on, is much like Reagan, Trump doesn't take a day off. He works 24/7, 365. I don't care if he's on the golf course, if he's at Mar-a-Lago. He's getting stuff done. The media can't handle that, number one. And number two, they can't keep up. They can't keep, which is why the headlines are "The world's going to end" version 3, "World's going to end" version 4.
Version 4, version 5.
Really, right? No, and they keep doing that over and over again.
The sky is falling. Yes.
Right. No, and it's the Chicken Little thing, and they're definitely, as a boy who cried wolf, thing to this, but we're starting to see a movement that I caught on to the other day called Walk Away. And Walk Away is a movement of former liberal Democrats who are walking away from the party because there's a great video out. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a great 5-minute video of a man who was a hardcore liberal Democrat, and basically he gives video and audio reasons about why he left. And it's incredibly powerful because it's based in fact. And it's someone who finally realizes all the things we're trying to tell young progressives now. Listen, look at your party. Don't listen to what they tell you. Look at what they do. Because what they tell you has nothing, in any way, shape, or form, is not similar to the things that they're actually doing. Abolish ICE? I mean, on what planet is abolishing a law enforcement agency going to make you safer?
We are witnessing in real time the reorganization of the two major parties in America. We've seen this before. The parties have switched side over the years on war and peace and tariffs, taxes. And I remember in 1973, the U.S. economy was in recession. Senator Ted Kennedy and Senator Walter Mondale, both card-carrying liberals, proposed massive tax cuts for the American worker to help the economy jump-started. And President Richard Nixon, the Republican, said, no, that would be irresponsible. We're going to prime the pump with massive federal spending. So things change. Yeah. Republicans used to be more free trade than they are now. They used to be more restrictive under Smoot-Hawley than in 1932 than they are now.
Right.
So by Democrats leaving the Democratic Party and coming over to the Republican Party is going to rebalance the two parties. So the Republican Party presumably is going to become more blue-collar, more populist, more skeptical about more socially conservative, more skeptical about nation building, things like that. So it's going to make the Democratic Party more left-wing and the Republican Party more populist.
I got to tell you, I watch it, and I've said before, the Republican Party in D.C., the swamp members of the Republican Party, stopped representing me a long time ago. The things that they say and do, they don't represent true conservative values in any way. And I do believe we're in the midst of a seismic shift.
I agree.
And going against the media that is doing everything it can do, legal, illegal, true or false, to prevent it from happening. I mean, my God. The fact that these people that ran the FBI under the Obama administration committed these treasonous crimes and aren't being made to pay for it with jail time or gallows, being hung by the in the gallows, is beyond me.
Lois Lerner is walking the streets. Lois Lerner is walking the streets today, collecting her federal pension. Was never prosecuted for her egregious crimes against conservative groups and abuse of power with the IRS. And so is James Clapper, who lied before Congress about the NSA spying on the private American citizen. Lying before Congress is a felony. It's a federal offense. You go to jail for stuff like that. And he's out there, walking the streets again, also criticizing Trump. So, people see this and they say, look, the system as it is now doesn't work because the elites get away with it.
They do. Well, and Clinton was she not the poster child? I mean, when we watched James Comey stand in front of the world and basically list her treasonous crimes, and then at the end say, well, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute anyway, and we're all kind of standing there with our mouth agape. I mean,
exactly. That was engaged in cover-up, the smashing of cell phones and the deletion of thousands of emails. This is what Nixon was driven from office for, was obstruction of justice. And ironically, she was on the Watergate committee, the House committee that went after Richard Nixon for the very crimes that she herself committed.
Yeah, I mean, this is a woman who to me is the most corrupt, repulsive human being to ever be put before us as a candidate, who was married to a repulsive human being who ran in the White House and did things that were not only unworthy of the office, but unworthy of a real man. And
Curt, this being the July 3rd, it's important to cite the Federalist Papers, which became the basis for the argument for the Constitution because the Articles of Confederation weren't working. Jay Hamilton and Madison wrote 70-some-odd Federalist Papers, which were published in the local newspapers at the time. And they talked about, in the Federalist Papers, what was important for somebody to be president of the United States. And the two most used words were experience and character. I think they used the word character something like 38 times. And, is that the American people almost always get it right by choosing a person, maybe not of the best, most sterling character, but better than the character of the opponent they're running against. And I would never say that Donald Trump has the character of Mother Teresa. But you know what? No. I can argue that he had a better character than Hillary Clinton.
And the fact of the matter is, I stopped caring about character when I realized that the rest of Americans didn't care about character with Bill Clinton. I'm not looking for moral guidance from the Oval Office. I'm a man. I'm a Christian. I can handle that stuff
that's right.
My own house.
The president should not be our moral teacher and leader, but they himself should be of good character.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, right now, I will take achievement over reputation every day of the week. And that's what I'm getting. I'm getting. Yep. Yeah, we're looking at record low unemployment for minorities. We're looking at the middle class American taking more money home. We're looking at safer borders. We're looking at ISIS getting its ass kicked all across the Middle East. We're looking at a lot. We're sitting down at the table, potentially ending the the Korean War legally and physically.
After 50
sitting
some
at
odd
the table.
years.
Right. No, and having Putin and Trump sit at the same table, I don't think anything. I'm not expecting anything great to come out of that, but certainly I don't see anything bad coming out of that.
We've been talking to the Soviets since Dwight Eisenhower's time when he met with Khrushchev, and Kennedy signed the test ban treaty with Khrushchev, and Nixon met with Brezhnev and signed grain accords and loan payments and things like that. Carter signed SALT too. Reagan met 4 times with Gorbachev. The Soviets, the Russians, now. And the United States have been talking for 60 years. So why would Donald Trump be condemned for doing exactly what his predecessors did?
It's the same thing at the border, right? I mean, he didn't implement a new policy. That's a policy that's been under since Bush and Clinton and Obama.
This policy goes back to Eisenhower. That's when we first started having a problem with the border. Was under Dwight Eisenhower.
You can't be a sovereign nation, and you can't be a nation of laws without secure borders. That doesn't work. That
is almost a verbatim quote from Ronald Reagan.
I want to finish up the interview by asking you something that it might catch you off guard. It might be awkward. You may not have an answer. But if you had to point to one thing that Ronald Reagan's legacy that he left us that is still somewhat alive today, that something he left us from a values perspective, a legal perspective? What's the thing that you look back on Reagan and say, thank God he did this because it's led to this? What would be that thing?
That's a great question. I think it would be, he used to say, don't look to me to solve your problems, look to yourself. And in that simple phrase, he communicated the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, which is that America is a do-it-yourself enterprise. Don't look to government to solve your problems. Don't look to Big Brother to solve your problems. Don't look to Washington to solve your problems. Solve your own problems. Create your own society. Create your own wealth and your own. And if you create your own poverty, so be it. But create your own prosperity. Create your own life. Don't look to Big Brother to be the panacea for what's going to solve what ails you. Look to yourself. And I think that still burns inside the Republican Party, and I think it burns inside of Donald Trump, and certainly the conservative movement, yourself and myself, people like that. But that had been extinguished from the time of the New Deal up until Reagan's election. We really had two big government parties in America. We had the big government Democrats and the junior varsity big government Republicans. But nobody was making the argument on behalf of the individual. Reagan's the first president since Coolidge, and Coolidge didn't do it all that well because he wasn't the public speaker that Reagan was. But Reagan was the first one really in the 20th century, the modern politician who told us to look to ourselves to solve our problems. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Is that this is why the liberal message is emotional and the conservative message is intellectual. The liberal message to the American people is that give me power so I can solve your problems. And you think, oh, that sounds pretty good. Okay, I'll give Washington my money and my rights and all that. And the conservative message is, and Reagan's message is, give me power so I can give it back to you. You have to think about that. He said, oh, I know. He wants to take over the national government, so he wants to reduce the power and authority and scope and realm of the national government and give me back my own personal power. But that's an intellectual discipline.
President Reagan trusted in the ingenuity and the entrepreneurship and the moral character of the American people, Craig.
Absolutely,
I got to run.
Yes.
Listen, God bless you, man. Thank you so much. Happy Independence Day, and hopefully you and I can get back together soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Curt. Happy 4th.
Take care. Craig Shirley, at Craig SBPA on Twitter. We're going to be back with